Dude, somebody needs to help me.
Well, hello there. Welcome back to Strength for Tomorrow Radio. My name is Stuart Thompson, in case you need to know that information. It's not that important, but just so you know who's talking right now. If you've been here before, if you've listened before, welcome back. If this is your first time, even bigger welcome to you. Last week we talked about how strength training can help you get better at pretty much everything in life. Sports, your job, with your family, with your kids, with your grandkids, getting up down the stairs, brushing your teeth. If you're a mechanic, if you're a builder, if you have a desk job. This week we're going to be discussing lower back pain, and you might wonder what qualifies me to talk about lower back pain. Well, there's a few things. One of them is I have a lower back, as do you. I've experienced lower back pain, as you probably have as well, but I've also looked into it quite a lot. I've dealt with it with clients on a regular basis. It's something that is quite a unique, it's not a unique experience, it's a common experience for pretty much everybody over the age of about 30. And if you haven't got lower back pain yet, count yourself very fortunate. You're probably just not old enough. Everybody will experience it to some extent in their life, especially in the West. So I'm not going to diagnose you, I'm not going to give you medical advice. What I am going to do is share my experiences in dealing with it, share clients' experiences in dealing with it, and give you some statistics around it and give you some expert advice. I'm going to tell you about what they recommend that you do with your lower back pain, and also some of the shortcomings in the current treatments that are out there at the moment, and why you might feel fed up with it. So yeah, all that to come.
And modern problems require modern solutions.
So first of all, supposed to avoid any claims or legal challenges, I should state that I am not a doctor, and I'm not here to try and diagnose you or to treat you. You know, what would I know? I'm not a doctor. But having said that, doctors don't really want to hear from you if you've lower back pain either. And I know I'm speaking quite generally, but if you've ever, been to a doctor with back pain, you'll get that distinct impression as well. Now, as I said, I'm talking generally. Maybe some will take more interest than others, but typically they'll give you painkillers, they'll maybe send you to A&E, or if it's really bad, they might refer you to a consultant, but you're probably going to crawl through the door in agony to get that far to get referred to a consultant. Just for one reason or another, doctors don't really want much to do with your back pain in general. There's time constraints, there's resource constraints, and also the fact that they don't really know what to do about it. They just don't know. They're not really trained. They don't really have to think too much about it unless they are, specialised in that field. They're just not equipped to deal with your back pain. In fact, I would say that you're better equipped to deal with it than they are, because you're feeling it and they are not. And you can do the day-to-day things that can take care of your back and rehabilitate it, and they can't. You get one doctor's appointment maybe every now and then to check up on you, but by and large, you're in charge of it. So I know I'm speaking generally here. I'm not wanting to kind of brand doctors as all uncaring or anything like that. I'm just saying doctors have other things that they can take care of and treat. Back pain is something that they're just not keen to do, from a resource perspective as well as anything else. But if you've, I'm probably getting a load of crap for saying all of that, but if you've experienced this and you've been to the doctor with back pain, you know this to be true. I don't have to tell you that. That's not new information for you. I'm just confirming it for you. I've had loads of clients, and it's a similar experience that they've had whenever they went to a doctor with back pain. But now, if you happen to have lost control of your bowel or your bladder, or you've numbness in your legs, or tingling down your legs, or lost control of your limbs, then you need to get to A&E really, really quickly, and you need to go somewhere to get a scan and get seen to. You need medical help. That is really important. I cannot stress that enough. But I'm not talking about that today. I'm not talking about that amount of severity or that kind of back pain. I've never experienced that, thankfully, and I never want to. But you need to get medical help, and you can disregard the rest of this episode if that's what the current situation that you're in. What I am talking about though, for the most part, I'm going to discuss things like soreness, tightness, back sensitivity, aches, niggles, however you want to describe it. Well, if you're listening to this, you've probably experienced one of those, or you would describe it using one of those words. Also, if anyone, doctor or otherwise, tells you that you have non-specific back pain, I think you should run a mile. Okay, run. Just run. And if you're in so much pain that you can't run, walk really fast. They quite simply do not know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. Back pain has specific triggers. And just because someone who's supposed to be looking after you doesn't know, what those triggers are, and maybe they don't have the time to spend looking for them, it doesn't mean that they're correct. It doesn't mean that they're right. And this is not just my opinion. This is the advice of the leading back expert in the world, Professor Stuart McGill from Waterloo University. I don't just regard Stuart McGill highly because he's got an incredible first name, but the things he has accomplished and the work he has put out has helped thousands of people, millions of people, maybe even around the world. He's got a book called The Back Mechanic. He's got a few books out actually, but I've got the one. It's called The Back Mechanic, and it's the size of an encyclopedia. It's a huge bundle of work, but it really is fantastic. He's got loads of material online as well. He gives loads of talks and demonstrations, does interviews, workshops, and I really highly recommend that you check out his stuff if you have back pain or it's something you struggle with. And I want to discuss some of his work later on. He is excellent. He really is. So I wanted to discuss my experience with back pain over the years. I'm 33 years of age at the moment, and I've experienced significant back pain, I would say, just a few times in my life. These episodes have lasted anything from a few hours to a few months, but I want to talk about kind of two or three really more memorable ones for the wrong reasons that I've experienced over the years. And I've probably experienced most of the most common ones, I would say, in life, but I want to share what I've learned and how I dealt with them and just what happened whenever I got them. First of all, it should be emphasized that people who train or lift weights and people who never train or lift weights, everyone gets low back pain, okay? There are no statistics that I've found which confirm that you get more back pain if you lift weights, and there's no statistics as far as I'm aware that you get pain if you don't train at all or you don't lift weights, okay? So irrespective of that, the experiences I've had with back pain have been outside of the gym. They've been more to do with posture and things, and I'll explain that as I go. But it's just the price of being a human and not a dog or a horse or a cow. We've got a back, we stand upright, and we have an unprotected area in our back, namely the lumbar spine. So in my early 20s, I can remember getting low back pain probably, I guess it was about 21. I was finishing my dissertation for a master's degree. I was working on one summer. I think I was 21. Basically, I went into a little office at home, sat in the chair with bad posture, should point out. I stayed there from about 9 a.m. until about 9 p.m. Came in for lunch, dinner, toilet breaks. Apart from that, I was just stuck at the chair reading, writing for about 5 or 6 days per week for, a number of weeks throughout the summer, just chipping away at my thesis. And gradually my back started getting more and more achy, and I knew nothing about my back then, or how to look after it, or much about posture even then. That's over 10 years ago. I tried cracking it and rotating it, kind of like you see chiropractors do. My parents have been chiropractors and I've seen them doing these exercises, so I thought I'd give them a go, and it felt good. When you crack it, it feels good. So I started doing this. Still didn't really help, probably made it worse if anything, but I got momentary relief. Eventually I did go to a chiropractor because the pain just started down my leg, which I thought was really odd, and it wasn't going away. It was getting worse if anything. So the chiropractor said that he wanted the pain to go back up into my lower back, and I thought, that's a bit odd. Surely we should be aiming for better than that. I'm only 21. But he said, give me some exercise to do, said come back in a week. Lo and behold, the pain did leave my leg and started going back up into my lower back again because I was doing those exercises. He was pleased about this. He gave me some more exercises, and I went off to South Africa. So I was going on like a short-term mission trip for a couple of weeks. But I had to sleep in a bed that was too short for me. I'm 6'2", so my feet were kind of sticking out the edge, and there was an end to the bed. So rather than sticking my feet over the edge of the bed, I curled up instead of stretching out. So I was quite short for time and space to do my exercises. So I kind of skipped most of the exercises, and I was curled up in a ball in bed, and lo and behold, my back did start to get worse again. It started to get tight. Just because I was so busy, I didn't really get a chance to do exercise. So I just sort of stretched out and tried to do what I could, made the best of it. But the point is, my back got better when I stuck to the exercises, and then I improved my desk posture, and I started incorporating regular breaks, you know, to move, to stretch, and then I learned a bit more about ergonomics and how to set up your desk properly, and you know, I was right as rain. Then I got back quite quickly. I got back really fast, and then I guess I went through my 20s, largely avoided any sort of back pain episodes. Throw your back out every now and then, but it was literally a couple of hours. It was grand again. It was never something too severe, and it was like you kink something, and you know, you walk it off and you're fine. I was training heavy. I was getting stronger. I lifted heavier than I ever lifted, and I was working a desk job most of the time as well. It wasn't until I actually started the gym that I started to experience some back pain again, which I know is ironic. Start a gym if you want to start getting sore, but I was racking my brain trying to figure out what was causing this. I was filming my lifts. I was critiquing my technique. I was sending the videos to friends. Go, do you see anything wrong with my technique here? Is it my technique? Like, what is causing my back? Because I was training so much, I started assuming that it must have been my training. But I had changed cars, and I thought maybe it's the driving. I'm doing more driving now, and there's a different seat, so I got a lumbar support. Nope, this didn't help either. And then I went to a chiropractor. It was a different one this time, and this was a real eye opener. If you've ever been to this chiropractor, you'll maybe know what I'm talking about. But not all trainers are made equal. Not all doctors are made equal. Not all physios, and not all chiropractors. So basically, the first session, he told me I needed an X-ray before he could start treatment, and then he charged me something like £65 for the X-ray and 15 minutes on a wee machine, this bed you lay down, face down on. And it's supposed to decompress your spine, I guess, and then had to go back a week later, and then he would tell me the results of the X-ray and another 15 minutes of treatment. But you know, you're only there for maybe 20 minutes in total. But I drove quite a distance to go to it, and then drove back home again. But lo and behold, he said that I had degenerative disc disorder, and I needed a 12-week course of his chiropractic treatment to make my back feel better. Now, I couldn't heal the degenerative disc disorder, but he said that it would get me out of the pain cave, basically. So I was stunned. I was about 29 at the time, and I thought, this is terrible. I've got a disease. This is a disease that's not going away, and it put sort of fear in me. But you know, they gave me the option. Then you know, you could pay all 12 weeks up front or pay in installments, but that option was going to be more expensive. So I thought, this is very, very strange for treatment. And then, having gone to physio since this for it, I realised that no, this is not common practice. If a physio thinks that you need more treatment, he'll tell you to come back the next week, or he'll let you book in yourself. He'll not say you need to come for 12 weeks. So, thought that was very odd, but how did this guy know that he was going to make my back better in exactly 12 weeks? What if it only took 11 weeks? What if it only took 3 sessions? What if, you know, how can you possibly know how quick it's going to get better? So I said I'd leave it, I'd have a think about it. I drove home as fast as I could, started researching degenerative disc disease. What is this? What the chiropractor didn't tell me was, you know, what I just told you earlier, that 80% of Westerners get it. It's really common. It happens to most people more than not. The chiropractor also failed to mention that not only is it really common, but you could have a scan of 2 people who had degenerative disc disease, and it would show up in both the scans. But one person, they could be experiencing pain, they could have back pain sensitivity, and the other might not. But whenever you looked at the 2 scans, you couldn't tell which was which. You wouldn't have known who was who from the scan. So whenever I discovered this, it really gave me a lift. I thought, oh, I'm not broken, I'm not diseased, I'm not finished, I'm not that old yet. I didn't have a rare disease, I had a common human experience, and it just becomes more common with age, unfortunately, but it's just the price of being a human and living longer than 30 years of age. But now, I want you to think about the language that we used. It was quite manipulative. It was intentionally scary, intimidating, dramatic. Degenerative disc disease. This is something, again, Stuart McGill points to and talks about how important it is. He refers to it as back pain sensitivity. So it's sensitivity rather than pain, or rather than disease or injury, because language is important. How we use language, how we use words, it forms it forms emotions in our heads, and we can respond to it fearfully, or we can respond to it stressfully, or we can respond to it positively, and depending on the types of words and language that are used around, especially the lower back, like talking about lower back pain, that can set you up for success or set you up for a lifetime of, oh, I've got a bad back, and just diagnosing yourself with a bad back forever. So the other thing that sent me running for the hills was the fact that this guy, this chiropractor, this charlatan, he said he had about 5 or 6 other patients in the building at the same time. So he's going around each room, and each person was kind of laying face down on the beds, with the bed was kind of motorized, that went up and down. The legs moved up and down automatically for about 5 minutes or so, and then he would come in and get you to roll over, and he'd crack your back or crack your neck, pop this and pop that. He did that every 5 minutes, just went around these 5 or 6 people. So he's probably charging like something like £30 or £40 per person for 15 minutes treatment. If you're doing that for an hour, it's no wonder he had a lovely Range Rover out the front. But I just thought, having been to a chiropractor beforehand years ago, I just thought, this doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem like he's legitimate. And the fact that he's charging me for 12 weeks up front for treatment that I don't know if I need or not is even more bizarre. So I ran for the hills. And if you want to know who this guy is, or where he's located, how to avoid them, drop me a message, and I'll gladly tell you. It's probably best if I don't name drop on this, because I'm a wee bit busy for dealing with libel suits and things like that at the moment, and he seems keen for a pound, this guy. But yeah, drop me a message. I would love to save you the time and the money instead of going to this guy. But I was learning more and more about my back, but I still hadn't really come across the reason that mine was hurting, mine was sore. I changed my bed, thinking that could have been the cause. It was about 9 or 10 years old to say that's how long a bed should last for. Did that. It seemed to help a little bit. I wasn't waking up in the morning, I wasn't feeling as achy, but I still wasn't feeling 100% right. So it wasn't until I discovered what anterior pelvic tilt was that I realised how to get my back feeling good again. Basically, I was trying too hard when I was sitting. I was trying to sit really straight in a seat. I was trying to sit nice and tall, and in doing so, what I was doing was I was putting an excessive curve in my lower back, my lumbar spine, and this excessive curve was causing my lower back muscles to get really tight and my abdominal muscles to get weaker, the deeper core muscles and the abs at the front. Okay, so some of the ab muscles were working. Now I could do hundreds of sit-ups, I could do incline sit-ups, I could do all variations of core, but it didn't matter. They weren't working when they should have been working, and my lower back was getting really, really tight, and the muscles getting really, really short. So my pelvis, you imagine the pelvis, it's a bit like a shelf. It was tilted forward, okay, at the front. So you can imagine the lower back getting kind of squished up. So whenever I lay down on the floor, there's a gap between my lower back and the ground. So the more I studied this, the more I looked into it, and this expert says that, and this expert says that. The more I looked into it, the more I started testing out things, different exercises, and I studied more around it and what to do, and I started applying some corrective exercises to help put it right. So it almost instantly started to feel better. I just felt like a release and a relief, felt like getting looser, and this posture is still something I have to fight against because I'm quite tall. I've quite a long back, and because I spend half my day sitting, half my day standing, I have to do these exercises from now and then just to keep it in check, and I'm probably going to have to do it more as I get older. Another occasion I hurt my back was when there was loads of snow. There's a big load of snow dumped. I came down to the gym to open up, and I thought it'd be a good idea. I better clear the path from the car park to the gym in case someone slips and falls in the slush and ice. So I got a shovel out, and almost, I think it was the first shovel I went for, I went to load it up, I went clunk, and I could feel something instantly going in my back. I just knew something had gone. So this is a different type of back pain, and it took a number of weeks to settle down. I did go to a physio for this one, and a few times, and it started to heal up. Physio was Andrew Fitzgerald, just to name drop him, by the way, give him some advertisement in business. He's a good guy, he's a great physio, can't recommend him enough. And I would go to him now and then if I ever had a knock or a niggle that wasn't getting better by itself. So yeah, those are some of my main experiences that stand out with lower back pain. There's probably other ones, but those are the ones that kind of stand out. Now, they're different severity, there's different causes to them, but hopefully maybe some of those things resonate with you, or maybe you've been through some of those things, I'm going to talk a little bit later on about some principles you can apply to take care of your back and to help avoid lower back pain, things that I would try to do regularly. So now that I've discussed my experience personally with back pain and how I dealt with it and how I figured out what was going on, I want to talk a little bit more about Professor Stuart McGill and one of his case studies, who was Brian Carroll. So Brian Carroll, he was a world-class powerlifter for over 2 decades, elite and pro-level powerlifting. So he came back from a devastating back injury in 2012. Basically, he broke multiple bones, and a lot of experts said he would never recover from. They said he would never walk again. So whenever he met Stuart McGill, he said, "I want to compete again." Stuart McGill said, "I could try and get you to walk again, but we'll play it by ear." So it tells you the severity of it. The leading expert basically thought, right, this guy's his career's finished. He's never going to lift again. But Brian Carroll now he's come through all of that, and he helps other people in private and one-to-one and group sessions, trying to help them rehabilitate their back, because he's learned so much from Stuart McGill. And they actually wrote a book together out of the experience, The Gift of Injury it is called, so it's well worth checking out. It's aimed at athletes, so it's trying to get them back and to build resilience to compete again after an injury, especially a spinal injury. But he went basically from a squatting 1,100 pounds and 800 pound deadlifts to like unending pain, disability, and he had a massive spinal compression injury. So he had surgery. He was still in agony. Couldn't really do very much, and his discs were essentially crushed. There's actually a scan. It's a famous photo. He put it in the book, but you can catch it on the internet as well. You can see what his discs looked like before he met Stuart McGill. Like, I mean, there was nothing there. It was just vertebrae, then more vertebrae. There was nothing in between. So the gel had been like squished and compressed so much that it really wasn't doing much for him. But he was able to come back from that, and you should see the before and after photos of the MRI. You would swear it was 2 different people's backs, because you wouldn't think that somebody's back could ever recover from the damage that was inflicted to his. But Professor Stuart McGill, he helped to reset his training, and he helped him fight back, and he actually did get back to the winners' podium. He went on to break American records in powerlifting after that. So there's lots of expertise in that book. They're both masters in their field. Obviously, Carroll from a lifting perspective, McGill from treating and rehabilitating back injuries. But I wanted to share that story because it kind of shows you the caliber of the man that Stuart McGill is, but also if you are in back pain right now, you think about putting 1,000 pounds of pressure through your back. And maybe you can't imagine that if you're in pain right now, but our backs are essentially all the same. They're all made of the same type of tissues. If you train and you lift weights, you're probably going to have stronger, more dense, and you'll have more adapted tissues, but we're still of the bare makings. It's all the same recipe. It's just we might have a bit more of this and a bit more of that if you do train. Now, the ability, if you think about it, the ability to actually hold a squat up, never mind actually like letting it down and getting it back up again, actually holding a barbell of over 1,000 pounds of weight on your back. Now, I know he had a suit and stuff on, a squat suit, but what I'm talking about is the compressive forces. And whenever you're in pain, you can feel that your back is incredibly weak and incredibly sore, and there's not much you can do about it. But there are things you can do about it, and Professor Stuart McGill in his book and his resources online will show you what you can do about it. So don't beat yourself up. Don't think you're finished. Don't think you're always going to be that way. We'll talk about narrative and what you tell yourself and mindset a little bit later. Now, over the last sort of 4.5 years, I have trained clients who have had back issues sort of on and off. I had one lady, she still trains with me, but she's in her 30s and she struggled with back pain, and just thought, you know what, I want to try and do some weightlifting because I've read up and I've read that it can help with back pain, it can help improve it. So she started off, got her lifting weights, checked her technique, spent a lot of time with her at the start to make sure she was comfortable doing different lifts, figured out what wasn't good for it, what was good for it, and with the correct technique, she started progressively getting stronger. She noticed her back was feeling lots better, to the point where she hardly felt it at all. Now, generally, if you do have back pain, you're always going to have to be aware of it, but you'll be pain-free if you can you can sometimes do the right things. Not saying it's 100% of the time, but quite often that is the case if you can figure it out and try and fix it. But with weights, especially when it comes to training, if the training is setting it off, there's generally something you can do to improve that. I had another lady, and she was in her 40s when she started training with me. She's still training with me now, actually, but she had a few issues with her back. Her biggest issue wasn't even, heavy load or a deadlift, but it was getting up and down off a bench after she lay down on it to do like a bench press or dumbbell bench press. So we did some different core exercises. That bird dog that were was a really good one, and she learnt to roll off the bench basically until she didn't hurt her back anymore, and to the point where it was kind of healed. And then she hasn't experienced it since that, and she keeps training with me. She's training with me regularly. She's able to deadlift heavy weights, squat heavy weights, do all of those things. We've built in some hip mobility and stretches and strengthening exercises as well. That helps keep her right. Had another lad, and he's training with me at the minute, and he has a little bit of scoliosis and a bit of kyphosis, which means he's a bit of an abnormal curve in his spine. So initially he struggled with deadlifts. He said previously deadlifts and him didn't get on, and they hurt his back a bit whenever he tried to do them at any sort of weight. So whenever I observed him, I got him to make a couple of adjustments. He said it felt much better, and now he's been able to start increasing the weight every single session to the point where he's surprised himself with how much strength he's grown and how good his back is feeling. He's even said his friends and his family who hadn't seen him for a while, with everything going on the last year, they couldn't believe the difference in his posture. And people have been commenting on it as well. So I'm not saying weights will fix scoliosis, they won't, and especially if there's a large curve in your back that maybe requires surgery. But what I'm saying is that some strength being built, it certainly makes it a lot easier to deal with. So I've had countless clients as well, who struggle with deadlifting, but whenever we started to work on their technique, and I made them aware of some things, got them to be more core aware of what their spine was doing whenever they were under load, if there was movement, and then give them a few little tweaks, keeping the weight closer to their body, trying to give them little hints, little tips, little tweaks, things to think about before lifting it. And a lot of them were surprised at how they could actually they were shocked that they could deadlift pain free. A lot of people who have some sort of underlying issues or poor technique, they quite often blame the deadlift for hurting their back. And to be perfectly honest, in the deadlift's defense, it wasn't the deadlift's fault. The deadlift simply found an issue, and then the pain that came from that was a warning that needs to be addressed. So it's not the deadlift's fault if your hips are tight, or if you've never tried to work on your hip mobility, or if one leg feels like it's shorter than the other. There's all sorts of reasons why the back can flare up. Now, I'm not telling you all these case studies and all these experiences because I'm a back pain expert and I want you to start lining up out the front or phoning and emailing me wanting to train with me to make your back better. Not at all. I'm not saying that. I'm not medically qualified. All I am saying, and the point of this podcast, is that with the correct approach to training, you can make great progress. You can get stronger. You can develop and improve your physique if you want to as well. And you can solve an awful lot of problems, but not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time. A lot of the more common back ailments and back issues, a lot of it comes from weakness. So a lot of it comes from faulty movement patterns. There's all sorts of things, lack of mobility. We'll deal with that as well. So we've discussed my experience with back pain. We've discussed Brian Carroll's experience with back pain, and his was a lot more severe structurally and with regards to tissue damage than I've ever thankfully experienced. But the fact remains that we don't want to be leaving you with all these stories of people who have overcome it, and then you're still sitting there with back pain, or you don't really know what to do about it. So I want to think about things that you can do and I can do today to stop it happening, and what to do and how to deal with it. Now, the old advice used to be just just go to bed, lie down, ice pack or heat pack or whatever, and lie there and don't move until the pain subsides. Now, there's a time and a place for that, but quite often if you go to the doctor, you go to physio, the advice they give out is to not to lie down for really, really long times, or not to rest for too long, because quite often that can actually make things worse. So quite often gentle movement will help things. Now, having said that, I want to get to the point. Diagnosis is really, really important. So being able to diagnose the pain and trying to figure out what sets it off, what triggers it, what makes it worse, what feels good, what movements can you do that feel okay, what movements can you do that really, really hurt, and basically try and avoid those triggers. Now, Stuart McGill, again, he talks about, a posture, a load, or a movement pattern. So if you can start playing about with those things, maybe you can twist to the left and it's fine, but you can't twist to the right and that hurts. Maybe holding a load like 5 kilos is fine, but 10 kilos is too much. Starts to set it off. There's all sorts of little tests you can do, but it's really important that you learn to self-diagnose, because, as I said before, a lot of people aren't going to have time to do that. And a lot of the time, even if they do figure out what sets it off, they'll still just treat what the damage is. So they'll maybe massage it, they'll maybe mobilize whatever needs mobilized. They'll give you certain exercises to do to make it feel better. But I also want to get into talking about what you can do to stop it happening in the first place. As I always say, prevention is better than cure. Preventative medicine is better than any drug or anything else you can take. So diagnose it. Try and learn to diagnose it yourself. Try and learn to figure out what sets it off. Is it a particular posture? Is it whenever you hinge forward? Is it flexion? Is it extension? Is it rotation? What annoys it? What sets it off? And try and avoid that. Give it a chance to heal. Give it a chance to fix itself. But if you can do other movements, include those in it. Next thing I want to think about is your hips and your shoulders and the mobility in those areas. So your hips, they are designed to be really, really flexible and to move in all sorts of directions. They're a ball and socket joint, much like your shoulder. So you want to make sure that you are able to maintain flexibility and rotational ability in those joints. Now, quite often, the back, because it is caught in the middle, okay, it is stuck between the shoulders and the hips, and a lot of times if the back gets sore, it tends to be one of those areas that has potentially set it off. And what I mean by that is, if you've lost range or you've lost mobility or flexibility in your hips or your shoulders, the lower back will be the part that will start moving more. That lumbar spine will be the part that has to take up the slack. It has to reach a bit more, it has to twist a bit more, it has to turn a bit more to compensate for the lack of mobility that you've lost in those other areas. So that's why it's important to keep those areas mobile. There's the deep lunge test you can do, figure out how much mobility you have in your hips. There is the clockwork hip mobility drill. You can do that as well. Tom Morrison basically has the patent to those, I think. I'm just kidding, but he is really good at explaining how to do those and why to do those. It's very hard to describe it over a podcast, but check out his stuff. I'll mention him a little bit later on as well. Another thing to think about is your hinge movement, okay? So how to hip hinge. Quite often I will see in the gym people, if they've said they've previously had a history of back pain, I'll start to try and teach them the deadlift, and the first thing I notice is they don't know how to use their hips. They don't know how to hinge their hips. They're maybe doing the old manual handling technique of bend the knees but keep tall at the torso. Don't hinge at the hips. And I understand why that is taught, because, well, they don't have time to probably teach them or train them how to deadlift, and if you're lifting awkward things, it sometimes can be a good technique, but it's a really, really, it's hard to overcome that. If someone has that way of lifting something from the floor ingrained in their head, they think any other way of lifting is going to snap their spine. So I would encourage you to learn how to hinge at your hips properly, learn how to engage your hamstrings and your glutes, the most powerful muscles in your body, and how to incorporate those whenever you lift something heavy, if you have a horizontal torso or not. But that's what I found. Most people do not know how to hinge at the hips properly. Most people have a bad habit of trying to squat things that they should actually be deadlifting or hinging, okay? So learn how to do that. Next thing is to build strength progressively. Don't start off just because you used to do whatever weight when you're younger or a few years ago. Don't think that you're at that level now. If you have not trained and you try and go into it, you're probably going to hurt yourself, and you want to make sure all the structures of your body are progressively getting stronger and adapting at the same rate. You don't want to, just because you got strong legs, because you do, running or cycling or hill running or whatever. If you've got strong legs, great, but it doesn't mean that your tendons and ligaments are equally as strong or your bone density is equally as strong. So you don't want to make sure that all your structures are building strength progressively. It doesn't mean your core is strong either. So if you put a heavy barbell on your back, you try to pick a barbell up off the floor, and you've got strong legs but your core is a bit weak, it doesn't know what it's like to pick up that weight from the floor. You need to make sure you're building into it progressively, and that you are learning to brace properly as well. So be patient, it would be my advice regarding that one. Core strength is another area you need to think about. So Professor Stuart McGill, give him his proper title. He's a great man, so I don't want to disrespect him. Hope to get him on the podcast at some stage, that'd be cool. But he recommends 3 different exercises. So the curl up, the side plank, and bird dog. Now, curl up is quite similar to a crunch, except you're not going to be smashing your discs together every time you try and go up for a crunch. What it involves, the difference is that you keep your lower back tight to the ground, so it's supported by the floor, and you're trying to engage your upper abs, especially to reach forward. So you can slide your hands, keep your knees up, but slide your hands along the floor, or put your hands through the middle, or slide them up your legs. But you're trying to keep your lumbar spine supported by the ground, and that will make it feel an awful lot better. It will also build good abdominal strength. Side planks are another great exercise that he recommends. Start off, if you have to, with on your knees, and then build it up to a full side plank. But it's a great way to build that core strength from a lateral point of view along your sides. Bird dog's another one that's really important. It seems like it's an easy one until you try and do it properly and stop any movement. So it's a really good way to diagnose, actually. I've found people who maybe potentially have an issue with their back before they do anything. So you get them in a quadruped position on all fours on the floor, and you're trying to reach opposite arm, opposite leg out in front of you, extend the limbs. So right arm and then left leg, and then bring it back in again. So you're taking away a bit of the balance and ability, and you're having to stabilise using your core and using your 2 limbs that are attached to the ground. If you want to know if you're doing this one correctly, what you can do is get a small ball, like a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball, and set it on the small of your back when you're down on all fours, and then try and do the movement without letting the ball roll away from you. It sounds easy, but if you try it, it is trickier than it sounds. But if you have good core, if you brace properly and your lower back's not moving, then you will be able to do it successfully. Now, there's other core exercises as well that you can include. You don't just have to do the only one Stuart McGill suggests, but those are the 3 he highly recommends that everybody does, regardless whether you do weightlifting or not. If you just want a healthy spine and you want a strong, stable core, do those 3. But Tom Morrison also recommends that you do isometric, rotational, anti-rotational, and reactive core drills or core exercises as well. So isometric, that's just sitting still, it's like holding a plank. So being able to hold a strong position. So some people get really good at one type of core exercise. Some people boast about doing hundreds of sit-ups. Some people boast about holding a 15-minute plank. But to be honest with you, the core, it works in so many different ways and it reacts in so many different ways. So you really do need to kind of batten yourself against all different types of weakness. So there's rotational core strength, that's being able to move with control. So the likes of wood chops and things like that are really good to build that rotational strength in the core. Anti-rotational, so be able to stop a band pulling you around. So you might be able to chop out and stop the band from pulling you back towards where it came from. That's anti-rotational. And then reactive is balance and stability. So if you, for example, did a plank and you got your mate to put a rubber band around you and started tugging on the one side of it, trying to shift you and move you, that would be reactive. So you have to really react to brace as that happens. So all of those things will help you build a stronger spine. Another good one that I would recommend is the ab wheel roller. So, or you can use a Swiss ball as well. Basically getting in a quadruped position on the floor on the wheel, roll it out, make sure your hips are traveling forwards with the wheel, not just your arms, your shoulders, and bring it back in by pushing into the wheel. So that's really good. That's an anti-extension core exercise, which is really good for your lower back. And you can do something similar if you get a big Swiss ball and you put your forearms on it, get in a plank position on top of it, and try and roll it away from you just a couple of inches back in and out, or do some rotational work with it as well. So all those things, whenever you get good at a plank, you can do a 1 minute plank, you need to start adding in other types of movement. So moving limbs, so shoulder taps or tapping in front of you on the ground. All those sort of things are really good for developing more core strength. And how much is too much? Well, until your back is solved and it's feeling a lot better. Something else you really need to think about, if you're only in the gym for a couple of hours a week, 2 or 3, 4 hours a week, whatever, the other thing you need to think about is what you do every single day. So the posture you're maintaining for a long time. So if you happen to work at a desk, you need to make sure your desk is set up accordingly. It's set up according according to your dimensions and your measurements. And if it's not, that's potentially going to lead you to unnecessary back pain. Your back is probably going to get a little bit annoyed over time with that. When you're younger, you can get away with it. As you get older, not so much, for reasons that we've talked about already. But you need to make sure that your hips are slightly higher than your knees, okay? So you don't need to be sitting low. You don't want your knees up higher than your hips. You want the other way around, hips higher than knees. You want to make sure your monitor or your screen or whatever you're looking at is directly in front of your eyes. You don't want to be looking up at it, and you certainly don't want to be looking down at it. If you're looking down at it, as a lot of people are with laptops, your shoulder's going to get rounded, your neck's going to get in trouble as well. You want to make sure it's pretty much straight in front of your head whenever you're sitting there. The other thing is thinking about is lumbar support, so making sure you've got enough lumbar support, and don't do what I did and try and sit up really tall all the time. It's okay to slouch sometimes, because what it does actually gives your back a bit of a break, and it changes the posture, and change is literally as good as a rest for the back. So make sure your desk's set up properly. Get a lumbar support if you need that, but make sure your positions and your heights are all correct as well. You know, you want your keyboard at the right height as well for where you're sitting. So there's actually a website you can actually look up desk ergonomics and Google that, and there'll be a couple of websites that'll show you how to set up your desk or what height everything should be, and then you can measure it accordingly. The other thing to think about is standing desks. So some people have gotten these since last year, since working from home. Maybe they've got back pain and thought, right, standing desk, that's the cure, that's the fix, that'll stop all back pain. And it does help, but the problem is it's still going to be your dominant posture. You're going to be standing for 6 or 8 hours a day doing your work. And that has consequences for your spine, that has consequences for your posture. And again, like we said, how you deal with gravity. So, you know, you want to make sure that you are able to change your position. So sometimes maybe having a station that you can stand up and do in a few hours with, or do half an hour standing, half an hour sitting, and keep swapping it about. That is not a bad idea. Or sometimes people get like a perch, so you can you're sitting but you're not really sitting, or you can lean on the standing desk and it takes a bit of a load off your back. But basically your most dominant posture, the one you do for the most time throughout the day, is the one that is the worst for you. And you need to just keep changing it up, and obviously add in some nice stretches and bits of rotation for your upper back as you go. Other thing is your driving. So if you're a driver, you want to make sure your car seat is set up correctly as well as possible, at least. So not letting the seat down really low and you're kind of slouching or lying back in it. You want to make sure that it is, you know, the seat is up as high as you can possibly have it, and you can recline the seat a bit, because we're going to talk about the next part is the different postures and how that works on your back. But if you are lying back more than if you're sitting upright, your back is going to be more supported by the seat. So it's giving your core less work to do, and it means that there's less compressive forces going through your spine as well. So set your seat up. Make sure that you play about with it. Don't just take my word for it. Play about with it, see what feels good, what doesn't feel good, and do whatever feels good, obviously. There's actually been a couple of studies done on posture as well and sitting position. So if you're standing, it basically measured the effects of 4 different postures on the intervertebral disc pressure, as measured between the 3rd and 4th lumbar vertebrae. So there's no study done from like 1970, but there's another study out, and this is on Durham Chiropractic. You can have a look at the little graphic, but basically when you're standing, there's 100% pressure. When you're leant right back, okay, so you're kind of reclined your chair, there's 105% pressure going through. Whenever you sit up a little bit taller, there's 115% pressure going through, and whenever you're sitting up perfectly straight, 140% pressure going through them, and whenever you're leaning forward a bit more, 190%. So it shows you the difference from 100 to 190, almost a double the amount of pressure through your spine. And if you're sitting forward all day looking down at a computer screen, or if your car seat isn't right and you're leaning forward, there's much more pressure going through that. There's another study done back in 1970 actually, and when you're standing, 100% pressure. Whenever you're lying down, 24% pressure. When you're sitting perfectly straight, it's like I say in there, there's about 140% pressure, and then whenever you're leaning forward, 190. So it gives you this the lying down one again. That's only 24%. So if you want to kind of decompress your lumbar, this is between the third and fourth lumbar vertebrae, so it's quite far down your back. But it just shows you what different postures do to your back, and as you get older and as your discs become less useful, shall we say, it's important to use correct posture and do postures that are going to help you. So lying back, reclining in your big lazy boy chair, it's not a bad idea. If you're having back pain, it will take pressure off it. Now getting up out of it can be a different matter. So something to think about. And the reason for this is basically from the moment you pop out of the womb, maybe pop is not the best word to use. Maybe that's not the right word. I was at the birth of my daughter last year, and I can assure you it's quite the opposite of a pop out of the womb. Anyway, you know what I mean. Basically, as soon as you come out of the womb, there are compressive forces acting against your body. Gravity being that compressive force, and it's pulling you down. And your posture is basically how you deal with that. Okay, so over the years, you'll see somebody kind of go into more of a kyphotic state. You'll see them kind of hunched over and dealing with it that way. And like we said in that those graphics and those studies that have been done on compressive forces through the third and fourth lumbar vertebrae, those forces will come into play at different postures. Okay, so sitting, standing, lying, whatever. So that's why it's important to change posture. If you're always sitting forward, it's gonna start having consequences in your back, and it's probably gonna start getting really, really sore and achy, and it can lead to other problems as well. So it's just to be aware of that. You can't really stop gravity, I'm afraid, unless you want to book one of those flights to space with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. But for the rest of us, it's probably not really realistic. Something that I made the mistake of doing was I was always cracking my back. So lying on the floor and swinging my legs one way and then swinging them the other way, or just twisting my lower back and trying to get a crack or a pop out of it. But like, you know, if you pull your finger and you click your fingers and pull them out of the socket a wee bit, go clunk, 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 and it feels really nice. It feels really good in the moment and for a couple of seconds afterwards. But then, same with the back, it's not good long term, and you get into the habit of doing that, and you know, having to do it all the time and feeling like you have to do it all the time. But what the lower back especially requires more than anything is stability. Like we said already, you need to create stability in your spine. You need to be able to learn how to brace and how to tighten it appropriately to stop yourself from getting hurt. So yeah, don't crack your back. Don't get in the habit of doing it. Sometimes it will crack whenever you do certain stretches or certain things. That's fine. Don't think too much about it as long as it doesn't hurt. But you shouldn't really be trying to crack it actively all the time like I was, and like I know loads of people try and do. Like we said earlier as well, I think it's really important what you tell yourself. So you're probably thinking, Stuart, why are you talking to yourself? Well, it's more a case of what you tell yourself in your head. If you get say you get a sore back, some back pain, and you just think about, I've got a bad back, you diagnose yourself with having a bad back, in inverted commas. If you listen to someone who's told you you've got a bad back and you're going to have it for the rest of your life, chances are you're going to believe them. Chances are you're going to go through life thinking that, and you're always going to try and protect it, and you're going to stop doing certain activities and you're going to avoid them, and you maybe even avoid doing weights or doing things that are going to help it, doing certain stretches, doing certain movements and postures for the rest of your life. And it really is a mental battle. I can't stress this enough. Just because your back is sore, it's not like you've got a broken leg or you've got a broken arm. Sometimes the actual tissue damage is minimal, if at all. Sometimes it's literally just because you slept a little bit awkwardly. It's not like there's major structural damage has been done to it. Maybe you just turned a little bit awkwardly, because your spine is a really rigid, strong structure. It's not weak. Like we said before, Brian Carrigan put over 1,000 pounds of pressure through his spine without it snapping or crumbling. So if you've got a healthy spine, if you haven't got osteoporosis or anything like that, your spine is a really strong structure. So I know what it feels like whenever you have back pain. It feels like it's really weak. It feels like it could give way and it could lock up, or it could something's going to happen really bad. And it's important to talk yourself around, talk yourself out of it. I don't mean you have to go down the street talking to yourself. I mean in your head. Just want to emphasize that in case you think I go about the day talking to myself. But it's important to talk to yourself in positive tones and to just assure yourself that you're going to get through it. You're going to get better, and you should always know that. And Brian Carroll's injury should be a lesson to everybody that the spine can heal, the discs can heal, the vertebrae can heal, and the structures all around that can heal as well. So with time's incredible. You can heal it if you do it right. If you're patient and you're not silly about it, you can heal it. And I know it's an incredibly frustrating process for some people, but be positive about it. Don't write yourself off or think you're finished or think you're stuck in a pain cave for the rest of your life. I can assure you that you will have a much better recovery if you have a positive attitude towards it than if you do not. And lots of studies on placebo and things have found this. It's important to be positive. It's important to have a positive expectation and to hope and trust and believe that it will get better, that the pain will subside, and that you will be back to doing the things that you used to be able to do pain-free. So aside from all of that, what I would recommend is that you check out a few experts in the field when it comes to treating the back and self-diagnosing the back and mobility. There's a lot of different areas that you can kind of look into. I would highly recommend, I've mentioned already, but Professor Stuart McGill. So he's got stacks of interviews, resources in back pain, what causes it, how to self-identify it, how to deal with it, how to stop with it. It's all evidence-based. He's a body of work that lasts, it's been around over 30 years. So he stresses that there's always a cause for back pain, and if someone can't diagnose it, it simply means that they aren't equipped to do so. It doesn't mean that they're correct. So don't stop until you do find the cause. Don't stop until you find what's causing it and how you can deal with it and make sure it doesn't happen again. I've got his book, as I said earlier. It's called Low Back Disorders. He's got other ones called The Back Mechanic, and he done one with Brian Carroll, as I mentioned, which is The Gift of Injury. He co-authored it. So he's a lot of papers, but those are books that he's written for the lay public, the likes of me and you, who are not medically trained, but they're really, really helpful. And as I say, he's loads of stuff on his website. It's called the BackFit Pro. So check out BackFit Pro. He's on social media, and check him out on his website as well. You can also look up, if you are struggling severely with back pain and you want an expert to look at it, what you can do is he has trained people and he set up a course, and people around the world have conducted this course. They've been trained by him and they've passed his course, and they're able to now diagnose and treat back pain. So check out the website BackFit Pro, and there will actually be a list of people, no matter where you are in the world listening to this, that will be able to help you and point you in the right direction. Another guy that is a bit closer to home, he's from Lisburn direction, Tom Morrison. So I've followed Tom Morrison for a number of years now. He's got some great stuff online, some stuff on Facebook, and YouTube will pop up, and also his website. He's a number of courses as well, workshops, he does them now and then that you can go to, and he'll help you out. Now, he's not medically trained, but he's a real guy. He's trained himself. He has experienced a lot of back pain in the past himself, back injuries. He's a very sharp guy. He has created courses that deal with your hip mobility and shoulder mobility, and basically stopping things like this before the start. He's not going to treat you, but what he will do is help you to stop things like that happening again. He's got some great self-diagnosing tools to use, identifying what needs strengthened, what needs stretched, and then giving you exercises to the fine details how to do that. He's got a very funny, sort of down-to-earth style, very engaging, very comical. He's very likeable, so it makes it really easy to understand for me and you if you're not clinically trained, let's say, or medically trained. He doesn't use big fancy medical words that medical people do sometimes use, which can make it hard to know what they're actually on about. He uses everyday language, and it makes sense to me, and it should make sense to you as well. So check out his stuff. Another guy is Dr. Aaron Horshig of Squat University. Again, he's got a great body of work. He's someone who's kind of been up and coming this last few years with the increase in the likes of Olympic weightlifting and CrossFit and different sports. So I have one of his books. It's called Squat University, and he's got another one just out called Rebuilding Milo. I haven't got it yet, but he works with football players from the NFL, minor league baseball players, professional basketball players, Olympic weightlifters, and youth soccer players, CrossFit athletes, and youth athletes in loads of sports. He was also involved in Olympic lifting himself over the last 10 years, competing and coaching, but he's a physiotherapist. He's also a strength and conditioning coach. As I said, he's a speaker and a writer. So his goal is not only to provide the highest quality rehabilitation to athletes that have sustained an injury, but also to help Sports Medicine Society become proactive in how they approach the athlete. There's a lot of physios who don't really know what to do with athletes, and they just tell them not to train. But he's got a wealth of knowledge on lots of different technical details of the squat and the deadlift and so on, helping correct imbalances and rehabilitating different injuries. Another guy is Dr. Kelly Starrett. He has a company called The Ready State, used to be called Mobility Wad, but he's a doctor of physiotherapy, he's an author, he's a speaker, and he coaches CrossFit as well. But he's got a number of books, Becoming a Supple Leopard, Desk Bound, and Ready to Run. I've got one of those, Becoming a Supple Leopard. It's a brilliant book. It's so thick, there's so much detail in there, but so much hands-on material that you can really get your teeth into and try yourself. He specialises in mobility, restoring range of motion, and helping empower people to relieve their own pains and aches and enhancing their performance. He's got stacks of resources on the Ready State website, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. Well worth checking out, and you'll learn so much about your own body, how to maintain it, and keep doing the things that you love. So check out all those guys. Just check out those names, those tags, those handles that I've given you, and you'll find loads of stuff that'll keep you going, and it'll help you get to the root of what's causing the likes of your back pain or niggles and knocks. And yeah, I couldn't recommend those guys enough. So although back pain is really, really common, the good news is that the damage is almost never as serious as the pain and discomfort is telling you. I say that because there are some exceptions. Now, this doesn't mean that you should just throw down some painkillers and get on with things. Pain means that your body is trying to draw your attention that something isn't right. When your back locks up, as we talk about, and the muscles spasm or they get tighter, it's quite often a safety response to get you to stop doing some severe damage to yourself. Taking painkillers without addressing the actual cause, it's probably not going to do you any favours long term. If they do work, they could potentially leave you with more damage without realising it, because you become numb to the pain. So you'd be doing movements and exercises or postures and work that is actually going to tick you off even more. So whenever the painkillers kind of wear off, you're going to feel a lot of pain. So again, if you're taking painkillers, probably best to seek medical advice. But again, if you're a fully functioning adult who is going to take personal responsibility for your own body, do whatever you want. But the main reason the lower back tends to be the most troublesome area in the spine, it's because there's no real rigid structure around the lower back to protect it. The rest of the back, your thoracic region, has the rib cage. Okay, the ribs attach, and it's a nice rigid, hard structure. And this makes the lower back much more vulnerable, which is why it is so troublesome. So it also makes it incredibly important to learn how to brace properly, like we mentioned above. So whether you're lifting a barbell or just something awkward or heavy, you need to learn how to brace. So how to brace and breathe in and down. So whenever you take the air in, you're not trying to lift your rib cage. You're not trying to make your waist really thin. You're trying to breathe in, push that down. Imagine your diaphragm going down, and you're trying to expand. So you're trying to expand your belly, okay, out the sides, out the front, out the back. And then whenever you do that, you tighten all those core muscles. So you take in about 70% air to do that, nice and quick. And what that does, it helps it's like a natural weightlifting belt around that area. So there's loads of videos on YouTube and stuff. If you need any direction or help with that, do give me a shout. But that's a really important technique when it comes to weightlifting and weightlifting safely. Now, this episode has gone on really, really long, and we haven't even scratched the surface. There's so much more we could say about the lower back and lower back pain and training, but it probably takes several shows to actually get to where we would want to be to do it justice. It's probably even harder to do it justice via audio. Sometimes whenever you see what we're talking about visually, it's a lot easier to understand and learn from. But hopefully what this episode has done is whet your appetite and stimulate your thinking and to delve into it in a bit more detail, looking at the resources we've referenced in the programme. I'd love to get some of the guys that have mentioned on the show at some stage and to interview them. I think that would be fantastic. That'd be really would be a dream for me. But maybe whenever we get the shows, a few more shows together, I'll drop them an email and see if they'd be willing to. And as I've said already, as a bit of a disclaimer, if you're the sort of character who likes a wee lawsuit, likes a wee claim, this is not meant to replace medical advice. Go to your doctor, do whatever they say, forget about everything that's on this podcast. This podcast is meant to help someone out there, and if you're a fully grown adult who takes responsibility for your own body and your own decisions and your own actions, then I'd recommend that you try some of this stuff and check out the resources and the sources that I've mentioned, and you'll be able to do that properly. And now it's time for some frequently asked questions. So in keeping in line with this week's topic and our discussion, the first question is, can lifting weights fix my lower back pain? So the annoying yet truthful answer for this is, it depends. I know it is annoying. It sounds like I'm dodging the question, but let me explain. Largely, these type of questions can be answered with "it depends" because there are several different aspects to it and several different factors that will affect the answer. So there's been several studies that have done that do suggest that lifting weights can help someone's back feel better. I have lots of anecdotal evidence. You've heard some of that earlier on, me working with clients and how they've noticed, it was their observation, not my observation, that since they started training, since they did things that were appropriate and gradually adapted to the weight, that their back started to feel better. Now, there's a study done by the University of Alberta which suggests that yes, you can improve lower back pain by doing some weight training. Now, the thinking around this is because you can build a stronger spine, you can build stronger muscles supporting the spine, so the whole structure is stronger. You're going to build more endurance, you're going to build more tolerance, you're going to build more robustness. So that's quite often why some injuries and some pain in the back can flare up. So whenever you get tired, whenever you lose strength or you don't have enough strength, whenever you get fatigued and you go to lift something, it's like the straw that broke the camel's back, that sort of thing. Just more and more pounding, more and more work, effort, and if you're not strong enough or you're not adapted to it, then you're going to maybe get hurt. There's other aspects as well. Benefits of weight training, obviously bone density. So if your back's sore because you've got osteoporosis or something like that, there's evidence to suggest that you can possibly reverse that and also strengthen the bones to the point where they will not break as easily, improve the mineral density and so on. We dealt with that a couple of weeks back there with the osteoporosis episode, but the other aspect of it is adaptation. So not only do the muscles adapt and get stronger, but joints, ligaments, tendons, everything gets stronger. So if you give it sufficient stress, you will recover and you will adapt, and then you will be able to lift a little bit more the next time. So if you build up strength, same process, the same attitude then is going to apply. So it's not just the muscles you're strengthening, but it's your whole structure. So it's the same with the spine. Now, I should say it's important to get a diagnosis first. So Professor Stuart McGill reckons there's no such thing as non-specific back pain. The University of Alberta applied that study that I mentioned to people with non-specific back pain. So I would tend to agree more with Professor Stuart McGill in the sense that there is usually a cause. There's a cause. If you haven't identified it, it's because someone wasn't qualified to identify it. So it's important to identify what the cause is, what the issue is, before you start jumping into lifting weights or training to try and reduce your lower back pain. If there's significant tissue damage, if there's been trauma, if there's compressed discs, nerves getting pressed, etc., then loading up weights is probably not the best idea until those things are addressed and the pain subsides to some extent. So you could get away with it. You could try and jump in and start lifting weights, and it might work out okay for you, but it's your body, so do whatever you want. But I'm not a medical professional, but the golden rule is generally if it hurts or makes it worse, don't do it. Should be common sense, but it's 2021. It seems to be in short supply these days, so I will stress that again. If it hurts, makes it worse, don't do it. If it feels okay or it makes it feel better, generally it should be okay then. But as I say, you're better identifying what are your triggers, what sets your back off and makes your back pain sensitivity increase. So it's like the little assessment I mentioned above that Professor Stuart McGill recommends. So figuring out, is it a load, is it a posture, is it a movement, is it a combination of all three? Does that set it off? Figure out your triggers, address how to correct them, and before you start loading up, which could make things worse. Okay, so can lifting weights fix my lower back? Maybe, but you need to do something about it before you start lifting weights. You need to address and test it before you start thinking about lifting heavy things. And the next frequently asked question is based upon, it's something I come across time and time again, and I've kind of put it into a question that a lot of people might identify with. So I've had back pain on and off for a few years now, and I've been told I have a weak core. Should I do more planks and sit-ups to strengthen my back? So this is one, I don't know who's going around telling people they've got a weak core, but it probably needs to stop, because everyone ends up coming to me and telling me they've got a weak core, and then I put them through a few core tests, and their core is pretty strong in many ways. So a lot of people think their core is weak maybe because they can't hold a plank for 10 minutes, or because they can't do 100 sit-ups, or maybe they can't do a side plank for more than a minute or two. A lot of people actually think they have a weak core, but they've never actually tested it. That's the other side of it. And again, I guess the annoying answer is planks and sit-ups, can they strengthen and fix my lower back? It depends again. Now, I would say this, if you have had back pain and you're over 30 or 35 years of age, sit-ups are maybe not going to be the best option. In fact, you might find that they start annoying it even more. Now, just because you can do 100 or 200 sit-ups, or you used to be able to whenever you were in your early 20s or your teens, it doesn't mean you should keep doing them. It doesn't mean that you have to keep doing them to keep your core strong. There's several different types of core strength, as we mentioned earlier, and some types of core strength are going to be more important as we get older than others. So we mentioned some of the big three that Professor Stuart McGill recommends: the curl up, the side plank, and bird dog. They're all great exercises, and if you do them well, they will sufficiently challenge your core to get you started again if you have had back pain. Once you have mastered those, you can start building them up and making them a little bit more difficult and more challenging to increase your core strength further. But a lot of the time I find whenever I'm testing out clients' core strength, I can hold the plank for well over a minute, to the point where it gets boring for them, gets boring for me, and then we need to start making some sort of changes. We need to start moving the goalposts, adding in some extra challenge. The other side of it is side planks. A lot of people are weak at side planks, not because their core is weak, but because their shoulder tends to be weak. So that's another thing I've observed over the years. But yeah, you need to maybe, instead of doing hundreds of sit-ups, try and do more important core strengthening exercises. Another good one I should mention is called the Palloff press. That's Palloff, Palloff press. Simply kneel down and try and press a band which is fixed to a post or fixed to an upright. Press it away from you without it hugging you or pulling your direction out of a straight line. Some great videos online. You should look that one up if you are interested in strengthening your core. So as I said before, there's isometric core strength, there's rotational core strength, anti-rotational, reactive. There's extension core exercise as well. If you use an ab wheel, it's another great exercise. So there's some core exercises are better than others. Better, I would say, than planks and sit-ups especially. If you have back pain or you suffer with back pain, I would avoid sit-ups, to be perfectly honest with you. So yeah, hopefully that answers that one. There'll be more frequently asked questions again next week. Are you ready for this week's joke of the week? So I had to sift through an awful lot of jokes to get this one. I've worked really hard. Last week's didn't get a great reception. Got some complaints. See what you think of this one. What did the left eye say to the right eye? Between you and me, something smells. It's good, isn't it? I think it's fantastic. You know what? You can use that one.
Stop it. Get some help.
So that is us for another week. Thank you so much for joining me, if you're still there. It's been quite a long show. I think this is probably our longest one yet. I keep saying this every week, but somehow they seem to be getting progressively longer. This is a huge topic though, so I'm glad we did spend a bit more time laying some of the groundwork and chatting about it. Hopefully you've gotten something out of it, or if you know someone who is currently dealing with back pain, share it with them. Maybe they'll learn something, maybe they'll get something helpful out of it. As I said at the start, I'm not a medical professional. Discard everything I say. I'm just some dude that has experienced it myself. I've worked with people who've had it. I've read a lot about it. I've studied a lot about it, and I'm basically just referencing what the experts say here today. So a lot of takeaways. I'm going to run over them really quickly in case you've forgotten, but prevention is better than cure. So try and do all of these things that we know that you can do now to stop it from happening. It's really, really common in the Western world to get back pain, but there are certain things that we can do now to reduce the chances of suffering from it, or at least suffering from it from a really large extent to the point where it's debilitating. Other things, keep a mental attitude that is positive. So, trust in your body's ability to heal itself. Okay, it's been designed, it's been programmed in that way to be able to heal. So no matter what the damage is, it's going to try and heal. Now, there are certain rare occasions when the damage is so great that intervention might be needed, but there's an awful lot that we can do with a few little tweaks that can help the spine and the back to heal and feel better and stop those triggers from happening. So keep a positive attitude. Don't let anybody write you off or put you on the dump hill. Make sure that you just have an attitude of, I'm going to overcome this, and good things a lot of the time will happen. Also watch out for con men and con women who maybe will try and take all of your hard-earned money and tell you need a 12-week course of this, and you need them to set you on a table, like happened to me. See someone who's an expert in their field, someone who you can trust, and someone who has a track record of helping other people. Get a specific diagnosis, find out what the cause is, and find out from them what you need to do to stop it happening in the future as much as possible. Don't accept non-specific back pain as a diagnosis. I don't think that is an appropriate diagnosis. I think that is it's kind of admitting that they're not qualified to deal with it. But other things you can do is learn to brace your core correctly, learn how to hinge your hips correctly, how to pick things up correctly. So that comes down to training. Also, get a good bed, a good mattress, set your desk up appropriately for your dimensions, for your height, for the length of your arms, length of your spine, and get your car seat set up appropriately as well. Avoid sitting for long periods where the hips become pretty much useless and the lower back takes a lot of the stress. Take care of your hip mobility. So there's things you need to do every single day. I need to do every single day to keep my back feeling good and keep my hips healthy. Improve your core stability. Learn how to brace correctly, as we said above, but also try and improve your core stability through the variety of core exercises we mentioned. Strengthen your core as well through those, and figure out your own triggers. So don't just rely on your physio to try and figure out your triggers. Do it yourself. Learn about your own back, learn about what sets it off, what's good for it, what's bad for it. Take ownership for your own spine health and take responsibility for it, like we said in previous episodes. So that is us for this week. Remember, train today so you can be stronger tomorrow, and I will see you again and chat again next week. Thanks for listening.